As I said, I heard you all pause and stutter a little bit after verse 30. Throw this slave into the outer darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. The gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Zephaniah is not much better, right, for our first lesson. For a full and terrible end he will make of the inhabitants of the earth. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. But the only one that seems to have anything true to say is 1 Thessalonians, where he says, for those who are drunk, get drunk at night. But obviously St. Paul has never been to an OSU tailgate before. Seems like pretty harsh readings this day. And so I'll be preaching from our gospel lesson, but along the way maybe we can make sense of a couple harsh readings and see what good news they have to give us. If you get nothing else from this sermon, please get this. We have a God who gives and demands more. Who gives and demands more. Our parable it's usually titled the parable of the talents. And I just want to get this right out of the way first. In the ancient world, a talent is a unit of measurement. There's about 75 pounds of precious metal, whether that's gold or silver. So it's a lot, and it is mere historic accident that the word talent is a unit of measurement in the ancient world, and the word we use to describe our abilities that we have. So it is just a unit of measurement. Our reading is our gospel lesson is kind of a good news, bad news kind of reading. So I'm the kind of guy that likes to hear the bad news first, right? Give it to me right off, and hopefully we'll end on the good news. So let's start with the bad news. The bad news is that God demands more. In the story Jesus tells, each person gets a large sum of money and they are told to steward it. This is a standard practice in a world where trips could be long and dangerous, and so a master of a household, if he had to go on a long trip, would divide up his property and give it for his slaves to invest and deal wisely in, expecting that when he came back there would be some kind of return. Jesus describes three guys. The first one goes out and he has 5 talents. It's a lot of money. And with these 5 talents, he goes out and he doubles it. Isn't that a great rate of return? Wouldn't we all like that on our retirement funds, right? So the first guy has 5 talents. He makes 10 talents. He goes out, he doubles it. The second guy has 2 talents. And he goes out and also doubles it, has 4. And then there's the last guy. The last guy decides to play it safe. The last guy decides not to risk anything. And so he takes the talent and he literally digs a hole in the ground and sticks the talent in it. And his excuse for doing this is pretty simple and actually, I think, kind of smart. Better not risk it, right? Surely it's better not to lose anything. Surely that's enough. After all, what is the doctor's oath, right? Do no harm. Surely it's enough to just do no harm. What's interesting, though, is that this guy's instinct to just do nothing, to just don't lose anything, that belief is born simply out of fear, right? I knew you were a harsh master, says the third slave. I knew you were harsh. And how often is that true for us? That out of fear, we believe that simply doing nothing is enough. In fact, we'll literally stick our heads in holes in the ground. So we're afraid that if we speak up for those people who are oppressed, that there might be consequences. And so we don't say anything. Surely not saying anything is enough. Or Or we're afraid that if we say something about that injustice over there, then we might say the wrong thing. This is a danger in our world, and so we say nothing. Because surely doing nothing is enough. Or we are just afraid that if we actually get that health problem looked at, that it'll be more serious than we imagine it. Or we're afraid that if we actually get that relationship problem addressed through therapy, that it might prove more of a problem than we like to imagine it. Or, and this is one I specialized in, if we just ignore that looming deadline and do nothing, surely it will just vanish in the middle of the night. And for all those things, if we just ignore it, if we just do nothing, surely that's enough. So the third slave goes up to the master in our story and says, I knew you were harsh. I knew you were a harsh master, so I did nothing. Here is your money back. At least I did no harm. John Wesley wrote about this text, though. He wrote, mere harmlessness is not enough. Mere harmlessness is not enough. The master, when he gets back, says to the third slave, you should have at least left my money with the bankers and I would have gotten interest. What's interesting about that is that lending at interest is actually forbidden by Jewish law, and so what the guy is saying is that better that you had sinned and actually did something than that you did nothing. Luther sums up this thought with his quote, sin boldly, right? I used to love this quote because it would get me out of all sorts of ethical debates that I didn't want to have. I had this roommate in college who was a militant vegetarian for ethical reasons. He'd say, how can you eat meat? Sin boldly, Brian. But actually, the deeper truth of what Luther is getting at and the deeper truth that Jesus is telling us in the story is that actually mere harmlessness is not enough. Simply doing no harm is not enough. And it's really true about all sorts of ethical teaching, actually, that is found in the Bible. So for Jesus, it is not enough that you simply don't hate your enemy. Jesus says that we must pray for our enemies, both for our political and our personal enemies, and we must wish good for them. It's not enough just to don't hate them. And if you go through the small catechism, in Luther's small catechism, I know you all have them ready to access as Lutherans, right? We have free copies in the office if you want one. But if you read the small catechism, when Luther's explaining the Ten Commandments, his constant thing is that it's not enough just to don't do the thing, right? It's not enough that you merely don't kill people. That's actually kind of easy, Don't kill people, okay. But then Luther says we also need to support our neighbors in all of life's needs, whether we think they deserve it or not. We need to support them in all of life's needs. It's not enough just to not do the thing, just to not kill. Or take the one that people were talking about in adult education today. It's not enough that we merely don't lie about our neighbors, right? It's not enough that we don't bear false witness against them. Luther says that we are to interpret every other action in the best possible light. Good luck being on Facebook. To be merely harmless is not enough then. We are called as Christians to use all of us, that is, all of our ability, to use all of our resources, everything that we have for the benefit and welfare of our neighbor. So this would all seem like too hard a task were it not for the good news. And the good news is this. Where Jesus makes this little line at the end, we almost miss it because the very next statement is about weeping and gnashing of teeth. But Jesus makes this little statement that I think we should all pay attention to. For all those who have, more will be given, and they will have an abundance. The point there is that just as God demands more from us, God also gives us more. Even the 1 talent that this guy gets is just an absolutely astronomical size of money for most people in the ancient world. And the owner just gives it out freely. The story doesn't tell us about how the slaves were good enough or strong enough or showed some clever investment strategy before they got the money. No, they're just given it. There's no tryouts necessary. And I think we are all awfully tired of living in a world where there are tryouts. We're awfully tired of living in a world where nothing is guaranteed at all, and everything feels like you're just trying to qualify for or justify why you deserve it. Not even our jobs seem to offer any sanctuary from this feeling, right? Because we're always trying to qualify for that next contract. So what Jesus offers in this story then is a God who gives, and a God who gives freely. A God who gives everything that is needed also for God's demands. This God gives abundantly in Jesus Christ. It is grace that is given abundantly, irrationally in Jesus. You need not qualify for Jesus' grace, nor need you try out. And every resource that is needed and every material that is required for continuing our life as baptized Christians, that has already been given to us through Jesus Christ. And even better yet, as Jesus said, for to all those who have, more will be given, and they will have an abundance. So what does that mean for you? I think it means that it's time to stop burying things in the ground. It's time to just stop sitting on whatever talent has been given to you. God gives and freely gives, and he gives abundantly. And so let us hold nothing back. For example, at this church, let no one who comes to our food bank go away empty. For God demands that we love our neighbor totally, and his demands are great. But also God has given us so much. And let no neighbor walk away from this church unloved, for God both demands that we love totally, regardless of who the person is. And also God has given amazing love in this place that just pours out. Let no ministry or no new idea look like it has too high a cost, for God has given this church all that it needs to accomplish what God has called us to. It's good news and it's bad news in the end. It's bad news because the harsh part is true. God does demand more. We can't just be merely harmless. We must do. We must love. We must act. We must give everything for the sake of our neighbor. Yet at the same time, it is good news because God so freely gives. Amen.